Hello, my lovely duckies, and welcome to the Boneyard. And we got a very special episode for you to hear. Yes, it's just an audio one. And we have a special guest here today, if you would willing to introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, I'm Braillynn from LibraFree.me, and I'm also a retro gamer.
That's great here. All right, so what, and you wanted to talk about emulation today. And specifically, you wanted to talk about how retro gaming survives and when there's emulation around there, right?
Right. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting topic that it doesn't get addressed often, other
Mm-hmm.
than when, if you tell someone, hey, I'm a retro gamer, sometimes that their response to that is, why don't you just do emulation?
Yeah, I've actually gotten that. I've gotten that same response, and it irks me to death. Like, there's this guy I know. I'll start talking to him about retro gaming and all the setups I have and all the mods I want to do to consoles and stuff like that. And he's just like, "Meh, I'll just download it and it emulate it." And it irks me to death. But I get what he's saying. But I guess we'll go over some of our topics here. Basically, for those who don't know, what is emulation? And basically, emulation. Well, I guess you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm gonna say the long and short of it is basically they're just ROMs that are played on um, virtual consoles, as it was consoles that are emulate. I'm getting tongued out here. Basically, consoles that pretend to be like the consoles that they're trying to play on, such as Nintendo and Sega Genesis and what have you.
Right. So, yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that for emulation, it is a software or a program that is written in such a way that it tries to emulate the hardware of an older console to make playing ROMs or ISOs possible on other than traditional or the intended hardware.
Hmm.
And with it, it also, because it's software emulation, it can rely on the power of the hardware, like a PC or a Raspberry Pi,
Hmm.
even push those games further graphically than the original hardware can.
Yeah, and that's pretty much yeah. That's actually perfect what explanation of it. But so I guess that brings us to the practicality of it. I mean, I can understand for a lot of people a turn off to being a retro gamer is the cost, and it as we both know, it can get quite pricey, especially if you're buying something that's a little bit more rare. So I can understand the practicality of just downloading a ROM and playing it instead of spending $200 to buy a copy of Guardian Heroes.
Right. There was a video on YouTube done by some ordinary gamers
Hmm.
talking about retro gaming elitists. In it, he refers to like the people who have an NES, they've got a CRT TV.
Hmm.
It's connected via just traditional composite, and how on a modern PC you can have an NES emulator and play those games 4K. You could have smoothing on to reduce jaggies, and that essentially because of emulation, it really makes older hardware, the original hardware, redundant.
Hmm.
And I guess um, logistically, economically, yes. But there's really a different experience with playing the game on original hardware, original cartridges versus loading up an emulator.
Hmm.
For a while, I've had a handheld called the Ambernic RG350, and it's got a software on there that allows it to run many different emulators. And I've noticed that even though I have that, I would still rather play Sonic, um, Mario, any of those kinds of games on the older hardware. I know part of it is nostalgia. Part of it is it's a very different experience than just picking a ROM versus getting a cart. If you have to blow into it, which you shouldn't
No,
be
no,
doing, but if you do,
no. We we
uh,
we ruined we ruined a lot of. We actually that was counterintuitive. We actually ruined more NESs than we were helping when we when we blew it to them.
right? And then how many kids threw away the boxes to
Mm.
their games, not knowing that one day they would be collector's items.
Yeah, I kind of want to segue to that real quick, or not segue, but I want to kind of sidestep a little bit. Something that really hurt along that lines. When I was young and stupid, I got rid of all my Nintendo games in a yard sale, and I sold them. I was like, well, I don't need this anymore. I have a Sega Genesis, so sold all my games, and I ended up selling a game called Metal Storm. And years later, I went to look back, and when I was recollecting everything, I went to look back on eBay, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go get that game because that game was really awesome. And yeah, I think I about shit my pants when I saw that it was a rare game going for $200 just for like a loose cart.
Right.
And I was like, "Oh my god, why did I do that?" I don't know what happened to it, and I may have sold it for real cheap. Also with Rocket Knight Adventures, I sold that for really cheap, and went back and realized that yeah, that it's also like a really expensive game that I had. Actually, a lot of games I had. Now I wish I had them. Um, wish I had them now because I didn't realize back then how valuable some of these would be. But yeah. Anyways, I'm kind of getting off topic there. But anyways, back to what we were talking about with the feel of it, I guess. Um,
Right, right.
there's
With emulation.
yeah, there's to me there's I tell people this who talk about emulation. I To me there's nothing better than playing actual software on actual hardware. It just, to me, it feels better. There's something about taking a cartridge and just slamming it down into a Genesis or anything, or even putting a disc into a PlayStation. Just it's so satisfying. And honestly, I feel like me personally, I feel like it's the performance is better because you're actually playing not something that's trying to pretend to be a system, but you're actually playing on the system. So I feel like other than that, we have to get like we have to at that point we start to just have to worry about our displays with lag. Because with some emulation, that's another thing I want to bring up was with emulation there's lag issues.
Right, right. I am someone who loves original hardware,
Hmm.
and I'll admit, I had the RG 350, but I've also dabbled in emulation on PC,
Hmm.
and I understand the upsides. Um, with certain games, like for certain emulators, you can force a 30 frame per second game to play at 60 frames per second, and
Oh
it
yeah.
does feel smoother. Um, and you could spend all day listing the pros to emulation. It's easy to do. You know, Retro hardware is, especially if you're looking at things as old as the NES, the original Game Boy, Game Gear. It's old hardware. It's starting to fail. Um, you have to put some elbow grease into getting these things to work, and trying to look at a
Modifications. Yeah.
right, looking at a 2.6-inch spinach green display at 160 by 144, isn't
Yeah.
necessarily easy on the eyes, but I feel like for anyone who is into retro gaming on terms of original hardware, you have to be nostalgic. You have to
Yeah.
have some of that, or I mean, because I've heard of people who PlayStation 4 came out, they were like, I can't play my PlayStation 3 anymore. Oh, those graphics, and oh, the oldness of it. And granted, those systems were around for like 10 years before they got replaced.
Hmm.
Um, you have to be a person where that doesn't affect you.
Yeah,
You
I totally agree.
also have to be someone who can enjoy games that are simpler. A lot
Hmm.
of these older games, they're not less complex narratively, is what I tend to hear people say. Um, they say that newer games are better storylines and stuff like that. And it's like, well, how many of these new games are remakes of old games? And did you ever play Final Fantasy VII? Did you ever play the original Fantasy Star? Like those are some story-driven games.
Like I was actually about to bring that up. I was actually bring Final Fantasy VII up.
Mhm.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, I haven't beaten it. But one day, one day.
Oh wow. Yeah, I've beaten it a couple times. I think the first time I didn't beat it, and I kind of put it down, and then I came back and beat it again. But I think it took me like 3 months to actually, when I first played, to actually beat it. Because I didn't have because at that time, I didn't really have the internet, because this was like 96, 97 when that came out. So yeah, not a lot of people had the internet back then, so it was kind of hard. You had to get like a strategy guide.
I miss those.
I know. And that's another thing too. It is nostalgia, and that's why a lot of people go to that. And there's people who I've seen, like on Reddit actually, uh, people who were never part of a certain gaming generation, and they're going back because they find that it's these are the origins of certain characters that they like. For instance, I've seen one. I believe I don't know his actual. I believe he was a teenager. Because I think he said something about he was a millennial or something, but or a Zoomer, whatever you want to call him. But he's I think he was like 14 or 15, and he was talking about how he got his first NES and a few games, and he was like, I can't wait to go on this magical ride. And I was like, well, Ducky, you're gonna go on one hell of a ride if you're getting the NES, because there's so many great games to go for. I think he only had like two or three, and so there's this allure, because a lot of because gamers today, especially younger gamers, they they know Mario, they know Zelda, and a lot of retro gaming I have to like really hand to Nintendo, because they've consistently put out these characters and games, because a lot of people know Sonic, Mario, all that, and a lot of people want to go back to it, and sometimes it's not easy to go back to it. It's not easy to get an NES and hook it up to a TV, and if it doesn't hook up to a modern TV, what do I got to do? And well, I spend more money. So I can see where emulation comes in on that. It's
Right.
a little easier to get to, but again, even the younger people realize that, or they see like a charm to it, to have the old retro consoles.
I
Um,
know, I know that people like to um, equate retro gaming to like vinyl music, where it's made
hmm
a resurgence, that people miss having a tangible um,
yeah,
object. This disc or this cartridge holds this game. It's not just another file on a computer. It's not just another downloaded game on your hard drive.
or
Um,
or if I could say, it's not just a license.
right,
you know,
and those will expire.
yes. A lot of people don't realize that. Like, you know, I got made fun of because I have an Xbox One, and I have the I guess the earlier model, or the original model, and people are talking, telling me that, oh, you're gonna get the S or the whatever. I can't remember all the different variations of it, but the ones that didn't have even have a disk drive, and I said, I don't feel comfortable doing that. And they're like, oh come on, man, I hate having discs. Oh man, I hate getting up and switching discs and everything. And I'm like, yeah, but I also like physically owning the game, and I'd still get made fun of that. But jokes on them. uh, You know, those licenses are going to expire, and what happens if, like, God forbid, a company goes under? That game goes with it. You know, you don't, because you only have a permission to play the you have a license to play the game. You don't actually have a physical copy. And that's another thing I fear with things like Game Pass becoming like the future, where it's
Right.
where we're not going to be able to play our games. And so that's another thing about retro gaming. It's so cool. It's like, when you put a disc into your PlayStation, it's like it's a Final Fantasy VII machine at that point. you know, it's a Resident Evil machine. It plays. That's what game it's playing. Whereas Xbox, you have like 15, 20 games on there. Um, so that's something I'm always kind of scared of. But yeah, I think that's another great thing. Is like you said, it's nice to actually have a physical copy of it. Like this is Mario, this is Sonic.
Right.
Hmm.
And for some of these games, I'm a big fan of the original Xbox.
Hmm.
And my favorite console is the Dreamcast. And my favorite game on there is Fantasy Star Online version 2.
Hmm.
Fantasy Star on the original Xbox, if that Xbox does not have a gamer tag assigned to it by Microsoft, you cannot play Fantasy Star Online, even the single player mode. It needs to have that. And that makes me wonder about the future of these consoles like the PlayStation 3 and 4 and the Xbox 360 and 1, where, in our modern time, a lot of these games are focused on, online play.
Hmm.
These discs that, for older consoles before the advent of the internet, contain the full game. For when I think about the future of retro gaming, people who get nostalgic for the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, some of these discs are still not going to be playable when you think about it. Like,
Hmm.
that anything like Dreamcast and older, those games are those games. And with the Dreamcast, it's actually a little bit shaky, but
Yeah.
those games. One thing that
There was still
you know,
there
for,
was there was still a I'm sorry, but there was still a large single player experience on the Dreamcast. But I get what you're saying. Even with the PlayStation 2, there were some games that were multiplayer, but all in all, you can play almost the entire library of the Dreamcast or PS2 on offline. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, you go ahead.
right.
Sorry.
Well, so when people are like, "Oh, what is considered retro?" For me, it's anything from the original Xbox and older. I know some people are like, "No, it's the PlayStation and older." You know,
Hmm.
that's up for debate. But eventually, these consoles that are modern are going to become, retro themselves.
Hmm.
Um, one of the issues, though, and I kind of wonder about us retro gamers is for those of us who like disc-based systems like the PlayStation, the Saturn. Um, Discs are not as they don't last as long as cartridges do. We're starting to see issues like with the GameCube of disc rot,
Hmm. No, yeah,
where it's the rotting is causing the data to become lost, and so some of these physical games are no longer going to be playable in the next few years because the rotting will have essentially killed the disc.
hmm
And then even for some cartridges, I mean, I know that you can still play Atari 2600 games. I mean, that system that it's still going, it's still getting games today. Fascinating. Um, but I'm assuming the system came out in the 70s, late 70s. Those cartridges are still alive. At least gives me a firm belief that the NES cartridges and stuff are going to last for years to come. But I do wonder about the next 20. 40 years, will those carts still be alive? Um, so I can see emulation as a benefit of that, but I wonder for the retro gaming scene, if these carts and if these discs start to die off, where does that leave our community?
I was actually thinking about that, and it made me very sad because, I mean, for posterity, yes. I mean, I assume like companies like Nintendo are going to be into the, they're going to be long into the future, and so they'll always have, their library of games, so there'll always be access to it. But yeah, some of the more obscure stuff is going to get lost to time, and that really, I mean, that just makes me depressed. I mean, because yeah, because these systems, I mean, a lot of these systems, like the Sega Genesis is actually a very well built machine, but like all machines, it's gonna fail unless somebody, you know, the only way I can see, them surviving is if, like, for instance, if Sega decides, hey, we're gonna make more Sega Genesis, make fresh ones, that's the only thing I can think of, but I don't see them doing that. Um, making new, make it like making new games, making new stuff for older systems are going to be, because most people are going to be looking towards the future and wanting modern games. There's always going to be that retro community, um, but eventually, yeah. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's things are going to go. Things are going to get so frail. It's kind of like older movies, from like the 1920s. Those that film is probably very delicate. It's very brittle. You really wouldn't want to be playing it a whole lot, um, because once it breaks, it breaks. So there's no parts. You know, um, but I guess that kind of goes into where, like, the modding community comes in, where they replace things, make things better. But I don't know how far that can go. You know, so
Right, right. I mean, yeah. I mean, we're seeing audits come out for the Game Gear. We've discussed recently with a power board from Retro 6, a soundboard from Retro Kai, um, new shells, by other companies. And it's great because it helps keep the hardware alive.
hmm
Um, but, how long will we be able to do that?
yeah, and that's really what it is. It's I feel like it's just a ticking clock. It eventually everything is going to fail. It's almost it's almost like there's going to be a heat death to
Right.
to the there's um there's going to be a heat death to retro gaming, eventually. And that really, the mod community, while very ingenious, I have to say, and intuitive, it's only going to delay the inevitable, and I think, honestly, in my opinion, I think that emulation will probably be how future generations are going to be playing games. Something like the analog NT, because if they
Yes.
if they don't want to play on, like, say, a computer, and they want to play something a little bit more like
Authentic.
authentic, yes, then I think these clone consoles and something like an EverDrive, a clone, or emulation cartridge, that's probably, maybe 70 years in the future, that's going to be retro gaming. It's like, oh, I got an analog NT, you know and I got, like, all these games I have from like 100 years ago with Mario and Sonic. you know so I just, yeah, I feel like it's inevitable, but um at the end of the day, though, do I really care what happens in 100 years? To be kind of selfish, I'm not going to be alive, so.
Right, right.
But there is there
Makes
is
me
that there is that posterity, though, yeah. But
It makes me wonder if, these cartridges stop working, will people still collect them? And I feel like they would.
Oh
Do you?
yeah, yeah. I feel like they would too. I mean, hell, people still collect the TV tuner for the Cape Gear. I think that's no longer
Right,
work.
right,
You know,
right.
I've actually seen people try to mod that where they put I've seen someone try to mod it where they put a Roku in.
Yes. Yes. I think that was posted to the Game Gear subreddit.
And yeah,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the NT Mini. Did you see that Analog Interactive today released, or they announced that they will be releasing in 2021, um, essentially the TurboGrafx Duo, with the CD drive add-on, all in one unit, so
mhm.
like the Turbo Duo.
No, I did not see that actually. So they're now is this like how now I might be getting my clone consoles mixed up because I don't really keep up too much with it, but I believe isn't the Analog NT the one that actually has original NES hard drive or NES hardware on it?
No, so Analog's deal is that they recreate the consoles with FPGAs.
Hmm.
They have cartridge slots that can take, with the case of the NT Mini, it can take the NES cartridges, the Famicom cartridges, and it has four controller ports for the NES. On the back, it can accept the Famicom disk system connection.
Hmm.
uh, they've also done the Super NT, which is a analog or FPGA recreation of the Super Nintendo,
Hmm.
the Mega SG, or the Sega Genesis. And I even know people who are against those. I'm not. I'm not opposed to FPGA systems. It still allows you to use the original cartridges, or
Hmm.
in the case of this new system, the original discs. But I do know that there are some very strict retro gamers who, they cannot have their console modded at all. It has
Yeah.
to be the original console on a CRT television. And I know the people who champion emulation, they see those people as crazies. Um,
Well, to be honest, I kind of see them as crazy also because I mean because see here's the thing is like I prefer like I said before I prefer actual ROMs on actual consoles, but I'm the kind of guy that can actually look across the aisle, and I can see somebody else's position on this where yeah, I understand. And, and like I've said before in one of my videos, I had a video where I was talking about the the pound HD link cable for the Sega Genesis. And by the way, I need to do a video update on that. That's actually a piece of crap. I I endorsed it. I said this is a great thing. It I hooked it up to my TV. It makes my I can it put my Sega Genesis looks awesome. Yeah, it allows the RGB to get translated and upscaled to HDMI. It looks amazing. And I posted that to the Sega Genesis subreddit when I was first getting into Reddit, and um, I believe I was crucified.
right.
um,
And I
yeah,
think it's
I said hey, and this is all I said. This is all I said. I said hey hey everybody. I bought these cables and I think they're really good. So hey check them out. That's all it was just like hey I think they're great. And you thought that I don't know like I had like drawn Muhammad on a piece of paper and delivered it into Mecca. Like that was like I had people like telling me like how dare you like literally how dare you spread false information. And I was like what the hell are you talking about? I, I just said I like them. And people were going, no, they're terrible. You shouldn't like them. You shouldn't get them. No. And I had everybody coming from every which way attacking me. I had people, um, doing a long, long, long list of why I was wrong. Basically, TLDR. So it's just like, okay, I'm not gonna read a lecture on why I'm stupid. And they had this. Yeah, they were telling me like everything that was wrong with the emulation of what I was using, how bad Pound is, and which they are. To be honest, they are a terrible company, and because all their crap sucks. And I was giving them like a pass on their Sega Genesis cables, but because I knew nothing about the company when I got it, which I was quickly informed, and but I had people telling me that I was wrong. How dare I? And then I had the CRT composite people come out, and they were and I was like, Jesus Christ, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll go return them, and then I'll go outside and kill myself. I mean, I think that's the only way I should appease them, because I was just like, Jesus Christ. I'm sorry for even suggesting that I shouldn't play on anything other than a fucking Frame Meister.
And you'll have even some people who, they're not for that. And
Yeah,
I find it really odd that in the retro gaming community, like, shouldn't we just be happy that people are playing these games? Because I mean, it's supposed to be all about
yeah,
games, and it's just like audiophiles when it comes to music. They just make it about the hardware.
yeah, and it's like, honestly, it's in my video where I was showcasing the Pound cables. I told people, I said, is there a better way? Yes, of course. I said, but this is like, this is a cheap solution, until you find something better, or if hell, if you just want something real quick, you don't care, there you go. I said, and of course I said there's people who are going to be like, well, I play on composite, I play on my AV cables, and I'm just, that's the only way to play. And I was like, and if you're one of those people, thumbs up to you, Ducky. You play however the hell you want to play it, however you want to do it. It's your system. You do what you want with it. If you think analog shitty composite is good, if you think shitty RF modulator is good, you go right ahead. Me, I'm gonna play on my HD cable and play it in full HD, and I don't care about Sonic and his stupid waterfall and the dithering and all that crap. Because
Right.
that
Yes.
was that was that was something that everybody kept bringing up, was about how the dithering, 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 dithering. I was like, okay, I get it. Okay, Sonic doesn't look good behind the waterfall, but I'm going at Mach 3 on this game. I don't care, you know. Um, but yeah, it's just that's the way I feel. If however you can get it, you know, if you can get it through emulation, then go right ahead. If you want to spend, you know, $130 on a retro Tink, and then on top of that spend $65 on HD Retrovision cables, and play your $3 cartridge of Mario, you go right ahead. you know, you go right ahead. I'm fine with that. It's if you got the money to spend it, you go ahead. Or if you don't, then emulate. I don't care. But I just hate those people that, this is the only way you should play your games, and it's a toxicity in a community that shouldn't have any toxicity. you know.
Right, yeah, right. Old video games.
Yeah.
We're talking about old video games, and to the diehards in our community, emulation is
The Antichrist.
right. Um, and these same people too, they're the ones who will buy the Sega Genesis collection for the Xbox 360.
hmm
Yet they'll denounce emulation, and that kind of gets into what is legal,
Yeah, that's
illegal
actually another thing I want to
emulation.
talk about. Yeah, um, about legal versus illegal. And that's really comes down to the crux of everything. Is yes, you can go get a Raspberry Pi and you can go and download like 6 million ROMs, but it is. is that legal? And the question is, well, to do a black and white, no, it's not legal. Because I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, it's a gray area, and it's like, no, it's not a gray area because no one's really been thrown in the slammer for it. Um,
Right.
but is it illegal? Yes, it's illegal. It's like running a stop sign. You may not get thrown in jail, but it's still legal. You throw a piece of trash on the ground, that's still littering. It's still illegal. But I mean,
Right.
no cop's gonna just swerve off of an interstate and come after you. It's too much trouble. Unless you're Metallica, then they will. Then if
Don't tell
it,
Napster.
yeah, if it was Metallica and a video game, yes, your ass would be in jail.
That's great. Um, it's interesting you brought that up too. Because yeah, emulation is not legal,
Well,
but
well,
no one's gonna.
to clarify, it's the an emulator is not illegal.
Right.
Yeah,
An
but
emulator's not illegal
but
because of
but the
we found that
ROMs,
out with Bleem.
yeah,
Right.
but the ROMs, yeah, the ROMs. But then the legal side of it is if you own the game, then you can have the ROM, and that
And
and
even
that goes to like with your audio discs. You're allowed to burn a disc or a PC game, or hell, you're even allowed to burn your Xbox games or whatever, if you actually own the game. And the argument is that's a backup. You know.
I've heard that even that is considered uh, illegal. Um, like if you happen to own a cartridge of Mario for the NES, going online and downloading it
Hmm.
from a ROM hosting website is not legal. I've heard that the legal way to do it is to have a device that backs up the ROM from the cartridge.
Yeah.
And
That's the distinction. Yeah, is that you're not downloading it. You're actually using like a machine that you plugged up to your PC. Yeah, yeah.
right, but I mean, who's gonna go through that whole process? I mean, I've thought about buying devices for ripping games from uh, Game Boy Advance, but that's just so I could have the save file that I did on the original cartridge in case anything should happen. I could put it back on there.
Yeah.
But it's such a gray area, like mentioned, and like no, you're not going to go to jail for it. It's essentially like jaywalking. I don't
Yeah.
even think a cop if I've jaywalked in front of cops, they don't do anything.
No.
They have much bigger things to worry about than people trying to get ROMs of NES and Game Boy games.
Well, the only one that you really have to worry about is Nintendo. Just make sure they, because when it comes to Nintendo and anybody doing anything with their games, it's like the Eye of Sauron. As long as you can keep out of its eye, you're okay. But as soon as the eye is on you, dear God, get out of there. Um,
Right,
you know,
and it's
because Nintendo, as we know, Nintendo, yeah, they famously hated Tengen.
yes.
Because they didn't they because they were trying to put it on the Nintendo, their games, and Nintendo didn't like that too much.
Well, no,
Um,
they found out how to circumvent
yeah.
all of their protections, and because Nintendo kind of had abusive practices back in the
Oh yeah.
NES days.
Hmm.
And so with Tengen being able to say, hey, we're going to produce our own cartridge, we don't have to have our games licensed by you, that meant that they could take more profit, and Nintendo was not for that.
No, no, they were not. Plus, also there was that. I I kind of feel like it was 50-50 when they say that it was quality control. Um, I understand that argument and I agree with that, but at the same time, LJN was a thing, and
Yes.
you 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 let those piece of shit games on there, so it's like that's still equality. doesn't mean too much when you have the Nintendo still equality and you have it on like DuckTales, but then you also have it on like Beetlejuice the game.
Right.
So but
But not Super Noah or Noah's Ark.
yeah, exactly. But getting back to legal and illegal, a lot of people, don't realize that the other legal options are like you said, these collections that you get on Xbox. Those are also another ways to play. And I feel that again, why I rather play on my Sega Genesis. If you want to get the 30 year edition, I think that came out or whatever, I think it was last year, the big Sega collection on your Xbox One, you want to play that way, that's fine too. I don't think it's as authentic, but I mean, like I said, you got to do what you got to do. um like for me, I have both the SNES Mini or the SNES Classic, and I have the Sega Genesis Mini. And people are like, well, why do you have a Sega Genesis and a Sega Genesis Mini? And I'm like, because I don't have Castlevania Bloodlines.
Mm,
you know,
yeah.
you know, I don't. I'd rather pay. I'd rather pay $80 for a system that's got 40 games plus Castlevania Bloodlines than pay $150 for Castlevania Bloodlines.
Right.
you
Right.
know, and
There are there's
no,
devices like the Evercade that we talked about.
yes,
You know, where all of the cartridges are collections. They're licensed. It is emulation, but it's also on a physical cartridge. Kind of scratches the retro gamer itch, but I know for some people it's a huge turn on.
hmm and I get that. So again, my for someone on my position, I can't really see. I can see other people's reasons why they do it, but I can't see why they're an only exclusive club. Like I can see why people want to play just on classic hardware with like no mods, no cake, just AV cables and a CRT TV. I can see that. But I can also see people who are like, well, I got this Raspberry Pi with like 300 games on it. And I feel like I'm somewhere in that middle ground. It's like I can see both sides of the argument, and I think we both can see both sides of that argument, and it really cool with either one of them.
Right. Well, we talked about, the experience is different.
Yes.
And when you've got something like a Raspberry Pi or you've got an RG 350, I mean, mine had 30,000 games on it for a variety of systems.
Yeah.
I
Well,
didn't play it.
I don't even know if I have. I don't even if I know if I can name 30,000.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
Oh my God.
But yeah, I would sometimes get paralyzed by choice with what do I play because really I had to have access to so many things. And yet, when you're looking at your shelf and you're looking at the cartridges, it kind of reminds me of being a kid and going to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, and
hmm
getting really excited looking at the packaging and figuring out what am I going to play today? What movie am I going to rent?
Yeah.
It's still with that like nostalgia. I feel like you have to be that kind of person to enjoy
hmm
retro gaming. And if you've got no money, you want to enjoy these older games, you know, do it through emulation. I've emulated games I didn't own. And I know those in the retro community, they would be like, how dare you? You deserve to be thrown in jail, go to hell,
Yeah.
whole shebang. I mean, I could tell them that, I got a um, power supply replacement for my Dreamcast. I had the fan replaced with something quieter, and
hmm
just the very that very vocal group in the retro gaming community who was like, it has to be this way.
Yeah.
It's not going to appease them, but you can't do it for those people.
No. No. And at the end of the day, you know, at the end of the day, it's it's your games, it's your system, it's your whatever. You do whatever the hell you want. I mean, is someone really going to be behind you? Like just 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 staring at you meanly. you know, just are whipping the piss out of you. It's like how dare you? Like you go to pick up a PSP, and then they're okay with it, but then you see that, like, your PSP has been modded with, like, games that shouldn't be on there, and then they just whip the shit out of you. It's like, I said, no, 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 you can't have that. And like I had a coworker a long time ago that he did that. He had a PSP modded with, like, all kinds of games that shouldn't be on a PSP. He had actually had, like, emulators on his PSP where he could
Mhm.
play, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, PlayStation One, you know. Um, but yeah, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's just like, honestly, who gives a fuck? It's like, who who cares? Play, do what makes you happy. Um, if you like, I know some people. Here's a kind of a weird argument, but some people love the Game Boy Color, and
Yeah,
they mod their Game Boy Colors out, and the Game Boy Color is a great system, and there's a
yeah,
lot of cool modifications for it, and it's awesome. But at the same time, there's people who are like, well, why do that when you can mod a Game Boy Advance and play your
right.
games on that? And it's like, shut up. It's like, who cares? It's like, there's all kinds of things. Like, maybe I just like the feel of it. I like the feel
Right.
of it in my hand more. I mean,
Where
you know,
you're nostalgic for
yeah,
the Game Boy Color. You're not nostalgic for the Game Boy Advance.
exactly. Just like, I feel I've changed my opinion on this, but I feel like the PlayStation 2 is kind of at the edge of retro gaming. That's the last from my opinion, that's the last, like, generation of retro gaming right now. And then, of course, as the years go on, it's going to go back, and then, like, the 360 is going to be the next, thing in retro gaming. But I feel like the PlayStation 2 kind of falls in that category. And there's people who are like, well, why don't you get a PlayStation 3? And it's like, well, I'd rather play it on a PlayStation 2, you know. Or same
Wait,
same with PS1 games. They're like, well, why don't you play on a
PlayStation
PS3?
3.
Yeah. Now, and that kind of gets into a weird thing because recently, um last month, I forget, I think it's Black Dog Tech, I believe that's what it's called. I have to look that up. I'll have to leave a link in the description. But there's this guy. He came out with the PlayStation Digital, or not? No, excuse me, not PlayStation Digital. The PlayStation uh, HDMI mod, where
Yes.
it essentially, it's like how the NES high def mod works. It turns your PlayStation 1 and has it output HDMI, and of course you replace the serial port with an HDMI cable, so you can link it right up to your TV. You don't need any kind of cables. You put the mod in and whatever. But it's $165 just for the kit,
Right.
minus the installation. But I thought about getting it, and I actually still do want to get it. But then people are like, well, you could just get a PlayStation 2. And I'm like, shut up. Because it's like, but it's HD PlayStation 1. It's like, I don't know how else to make that argument. I understand what they're saying. It's cheaper, but I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know. I think it's so badass to to have a PlayStation 1 that could be be HD, you know. Um
Right.
and I understand it's not for everybody, you know. Um and honestly, it is kind of an expensive route to go, but hey, if as long as the bills are paid and you got groceries, it's your money, whatever you want to do. Um,
Right. Right.
I mean, I collect CIB games, complete in box. I have 3 copies of Dragon Warrior. I have Loose Cart, and I have 2 CIBs. You know, do I need 2 CIBs? No, but I saw it and I wanted it. So who cares? It was like $10 at a retro gaming store, and I was like, well, yeah, I can't pass that up. But somebody who's practical goes, well, you already have it. And
Right.
I'm like, yeah, but it's $10. you know, it's in the box, $10. Come on, I can't pass it up. So
Right.
I understand some people get pissed off, about the practicality of things, but then a lot of times it's just not as cool. you know.
Right. I think of people who are book lovers and they'll spend it's more expensive to buy a physical book than to buy it on, say, a Kindle or a Nook.
hmm
And because they're big, they take up physical space.
hmm
And it's interesting because people don't give people who have libraries in their house, they don't give them crap. If you or I have a shelf full of retro games, it doesn't have that same
Stig-
gravitas
stigma.
to it, yeah, stigma. um, and in both of those camps is just people who are very passionate about the platform and about the art behind it. And I don't know why retro gaming carries a very different weight to it, other than that gaming as a whole still has a negative stigma around it.
Yeah, it's basically the terms have changed, but the stereotype is the same. Um, you know, um, it used to be uh back in, like, I believe the late 70s, when arcades were starting to get popular. People were spending their allowances, putting quarters into the machines, and parents didn't understand it. You know, and then when then you had, like, people who were into gaming, and console gaming in the 80s. It was very weird to see someone who was just an adult have a Nintendo. It was almost seen as something like a toy, you know.
Right.
Um, because everybody had, when back in the early 80s, everyone had a Nintendo, and then that one kid had the Sega Master System, but everyone had a Nintendo. you know there was always that one kid who had that weird gaming system that you had no idea what the hell it is. And
I had the Atari 2600, so I was one of those kids.
yeah, yeah. And but I never saw just a guy, like a guy who's, like, in his 20s, single, lives by himself, whatever, and just has a Nintendo and plays it, and it's just a hobby, like it is now, for people. Like, it's just a hobby. They collect games and stuff, but it was always, I guess, there's that stigma that it's just for children, and
Right.
it's almost the same kind of stigma as people who collect toys, you know.
Yes.
Um,
Or the amiibos.
the amiibos. um, but see,
Skylanders.
yeah, but well, see, with the toys, it's a little different because, like, if you're someone who like, say for instance, you go into someone's house, right, and they have their wall is nothing but in the box Ninja, or in Ninja Turtles in the blister packs, all hanging on the wall. You're gonna be like, wow, this guy's, people are gonna be like, wow, this guy's kind of a nerd, a geek or
Right.
whatever. This is a 40-year-old virgin. But then,
Right. Ugh.
but then you see somebody on there and they have, like, original, 1960s GI Joe. Those older kind of toys. Old rusted metal van, or something, like a little toy or a Hot Wheels. So they'll be, oh, cool, those are real cool. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I spent, like, $250 in an auction, got this here. But then it's like, yeah, well, hey, I spent $80 and got this at got an auction here. I got an original Leonardo, and they're like, oh God, Ninja Turtles, what are you, some kind of kid? He-Man? Why don't you grow up, asshole? You know,
Right.
fucking incel.
Right.
you know, you know. But that's the thing too. Is, like, it's just that's that stigma of being in your mother's basement playing your games.
Right.
not getting any action, and you know, being a virgin, all that. For some reason I don't know why that stigma is still around. Um, Seeing how gaming is modern gaming is, a multi-billion-dollar industry, and that whole nations like South Korea, you know, their economy is like dedicated to gaming, and but here in the U.S., if I got, if somebody comes in here and sees my collection, they're gonna be like, there's gonna be one of two reactions. It's gonna be like, holy shit, that's awesome. That's kind of cool. And then, oh my god, this guy's a man baby. you know.
Right. It's so interesting because Henry Cavill, Terry Crews, they've mentioned to people that they're heavily into PC gaming, and there is still that part of the media that's like, really, what, you guys like gaming, and I feel like that's really pushed by them. But I do love it that we have celebrities, we think of them as the most successful people there are, that they can say, hey, no, I'm into gaming, it's not a thing for kids.
Yeah.
But with
Well,
retro gaming, there's even a different stigma to. I feel like you'll get a population, a group of people who, if it's like, hey, I'm getting the new Xbox or I'm getting the new PlayStation, they're like, oh, right on, like, what kind of games are you into? But if you were to tell that same group of people, like, oh, I just bought myself a Super Nintendo, you're gonna get a very different response.
I'm sorry. I've had this conversation recently. I,
What? You
I,
tell.
I've, people go, so what are you playing now? And I'm like, uh, and then, people, everyone's like, talking, and they're like, yeah, man, I'm playing that new Call of Duty. Yeah, I'm playing that, that Battlefield. Yeah, man. Oh, man, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So, what are you playing right now? Um, Final Fantasy VII, and it's like a radio skip, and it's like you've just killed the mood. It's like, oh yeah, I started a new game on Metroid. I can't wait to finish that. And then people are like, what? And then it's like, especially with younger people, they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. So, anyways, about that battle pass, you gonna get that thing? And it's just like they just go off, But I've done that where I'll be like, hey, guess what? I'm gonna like what do you plan on doing? I'm like, well, I'm gonna mod my NES and have it output RGB, and you start you min off everything, and then as you're
Mhm.
talking to them, you can see like literally their attention like just go away. They just You can see their attention just literally drift away, and it's just like, you don't care. you know.
At my last job, um, people were like, "Oh, what are you gonna do this weekend?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to Goodwill, or I'm gonna go check out the local retro gaming shop, see if I can get any Dreamcast games." And they're like, "What's a Dreamcast?" The minute I start explaining, oh, it's this game console that came out and like whatever.
They're done.
Wish I knew that my favorite console. Yeah, yeah. Their eyes have kind of glazed over,
All right.
and they're just like,
All right. So,
what is
anyways, back to
what is
what we
wrong
were
with
talking
you?
about.
Mhm.
You know, you know. All right. Well, thanks for that break in the action. Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, I've had that same conversation where people are like, "So, what are you doing this weekend?" I'm thinking about hitting this antique and toy mall, and then the look immediately is like, oh my god, he's an incel. you know,
Well, I mean, they may. Oh, are you into antiquing? And it's like, well, you could say that.
it's like, well, I'm looking for like, I'm looking for Game Gears, and then I've had that also. Like, what's a Game Gear?
Hmm.
Oh, and I feel like I don't want to offend anybody, but I do feel like kind of like a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness. I'm like, well, let's pull up a seat and let me tell you the old story here. You know, no offense to anybody out there, but yeah, I just feel like it's like, hey, well, let me tell you about the good news of Sega. You know,
Right, right. Gosh, when I started my website, librefree.me, and I had to explain to people what my website is about. I'm like, oh, I cover, open source hardware, software, and all things related to it. Just like you could see the gears kind of slowing down. Like, I have
yeah,
no idea what the heck you're talking about. And then, I'll start explaining like, oh, for Linux, like these are these pros and cons versus Windows, and I've lost them.
yeah, yeah. That's pretty much yeah. You can see the look on their face where they're like, yeah, they're gone. They're
Right?
they're they're off to something else.
You do get lucky though. You'll get those people. Oh my god, I had one of those when I was a kid.
Hmm.
Um, and I think a lot of us were like that before we got into retro gaming. We have that memory, or maybe we saw something, somebody said something about a certain console or a certain game, and it takes us back to a different time. And it seems to be, when we're kids, we can get what our parents can afford for us. We can, like my first game console that was actually mine was the Sega Genesis. So early
Yeah,
on, I was a Sega kid. My dad had an Atari 2600. I remember playing that a little bit. Um, and then when you get older, you start to make money. You start to want to acquire some of those things from your childhood. You also develop a love of stuff from that time period, because there are people who get into retro gaming and they were a Nintendo kid
hmm,
and they go and they buy a Sega Master System because I never got to experience that.
yeah. And I think that yeah, that also goes back to like people who weren't even around there. People who are in their teens and 20s going back and playing like an NES or whatever because like they want to experience what was that was like and but I understand completely because that's the whole reason I even got a Game Gear in the first place was I remember it. I never had one. I never knew anybody that had one, but man, it looked cool as shit. And I was like, well, I'm an adult who makes money and has disposable cash. I'll just go ahead and buy one, you know? And it's like, wow, man, after 30 years, I can finally get one, you know? And,
Right. It's also
or my, recently I bought well, a couple months ago, I bought a Super Nintendo and I told people, I did a video about it and, I said, yeah, this is my first Super Nintendo. I am so happy. It's after like 20, 30 years after it's come out. It's my first one. And there's that feeling of I couldn't afford it as a child. Yeah, like you were saying, and I
mhm,
want to get that now. Because for a lot of us, most people, not made of money. And my my first retro console, actually my first console, was the Nintendo Entertainment System, and I had that. I played my Nintendo until until the see here. Yeah, I played my NES until the beginning of '96
wow.
when I finally got my Sega Genesis for my birthday. And then I played my Sega Genesis that whole year. And I got for Christmas that year, I got a ton of Sega Genesis games in the Christmas of '96, and I couldn't have been happier. And this was like and they got them from like Blockbuster because Blockbuster was selling them because they were trying to get rid of them. And yeah, so when everybody was getting a PlayStation, a Sega Saturn, I was getting into Sega Genesis because my family, we didn't have money. We didn't have a lot of cash just buy these expensive consoles and stuff. And it wasn't until a few years later when I finally got my first job and working at a fast food place and my first ever paycheck went to buying a PlayStation 1 when it had like its first major price drop.
Mm.
And I got a DualShock uh, PlayStation 1. And so I would have to say, if I had to say like what was my favorite console, I'm probably going to say for nostalgia reasons the PlayStation 1, just because it was the first console that I bought with my own money. And from there, then, if anything I ever wanted, I've pretty much kept up to the times with gaming since then. Um, because I can actually afford it now. I can afford it. Having money. But yeah, as a kid, yeah, it sucked. Um, I will say it was embarrassing when I went to school. Finally went back to school in the winter of '96, and everybody was talking about what they got. And
Mm.
everybody had a Sega Saturn or a PlayStation. And then they got to me and like, what'd you get? And I was like, Sega Genesis games, damn it. And I'm happy. You know, mine's gonna be worth for a ton of money in the future. Just um, and but yeah, I could see why there's that yearn to go back and play things, and for even the younger generations, the younger kids, there's that yearn to see what it was all about, you know, and it's kind of sad because for a lot of people, you know, the only way they're going to be able to play it is through emulation, and but it's not a complete sad story, because I mean we do have some legal emulation that is actually pretty good. Like the Sega Genesis Mini is an excellent emulation of games. It's not perfect, but if you want a taste of what the Sega Genesis library has to offer, I fully endorse that. That's awesome.
Party
Um,
games.
yeah, or if you want to get the Castlevania collection, that just came out not too long ago, I understand that. So I would say try, you know, to kind of wrap this all up. I would say do what you want, but if you're gonna do emulation, try to do it legally, you know. But if it's not possible, I mean, yeah, just buy and EverDrive, or I would say don't download all the stuff. Just maybe try to get them off of, like like you said, the EverDrives, or they have that one thing for the PlayStation One Classic. Have you seen that, where it's the crack packs and the meth packs and the overdose packs?
I haven't seen those now.
No, okay, so for all those who don't know, so the PlayStation One Classic is a piece of shit, and we can all agree with that. It's terrible games. Basically, as we all know, it was a Sony cash grab to get on the nostalgia market. They put no effort into it. The only things that are on there worth playing is like Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy 7. Those are like the two biggest games on there. So, what some people have done is you can actually go to Amazon and get this. There's these gaming. I forget what they're called. What the name of the actual product is, but um, if you look it up, there's they sell these, basically like these four USB slot dongles that go into the USB slot of your PlayStation Classic, and then it also comes with a thumb drive, and depending on which thumb drive you buy, will depend on how many games are on that. So what you'll do is you'll put into the dongle that you bought. You put it in there, and when you boot it up, it'll have like 250 PlayStation games, which I don't know how you're going to play all of those since there's not a DualShock controller, and a lot of them need that analog. Um, but it's funny because like the different packs that you can buy with different games, and real quick, that's the thing is if you buy the 50 pack and then say you go and buy the 150 pack, it's not the same games in the 50. Like they all have different titles in each one of them, so it doesn't matter. It's like, oh, I'm gonna buy, if I buy the 150 pack, it's gonna have the 50 plus another 100. No, it's 150 different games, you know. So so if you want to get the entire thing, you're gonna have to buy all three different packs. But what's crazy is they're all named the overdose pack, the crack pack, and the meth pack. I have no idea why. But yeah, if you buy them, yeah, that's another way. And that's the thing. Is like I was like the fact that they're selling it on Amazon. I don't even think Amazon knows what the hell it is. you know.
Because I imagine it's not licensed by Sony, right?
Yeah, it's no. It's all. Do you think Sony would really have something called the crack pack in the meth pack?
No, no, no.
Yeah. So yeah, it's that to me that's a little bit more suspicious. I don't I because like with an EverDrive, it's just like, oh, it's a cartridge and you put it in the console and there you go. This one, it's like you gotta like jimmy something. You gotta jury rig this whole thing first. Um, and you can't have two thumbsticks in there, even though it's like a 4 to 3 slot USB splitter. You can't use all the thumb drives together. You have to use one at a time. So it's kind of dumb, but it doesn't hurt your system because when you unplug everything and you turn it back on, it becomes a regular PlayStation 1 classic. Um, I'm not sure about save states. I think there are save states on there, or there had to be. Um, but I would say, if you're going to emulate, try to like get a cartridge. Don't get on a peer to peer and start downloading. you know, it looks a little bit better on you, I guess.
Right. And downloading hundreds of ROMs can take
Hmm.
a long time. And if you're somebody who's not interested in spending all that time, in the past, I've gone on to places like Etsy or eBay.
Hmm.
Someone will sell like a USB stick with like 50,000 ROMs or something.
Yeah.
Say no duplicates, and most of them will play just fine. It's like they design them for this one works for the Raspberry Pi, this one works for this emulation handheld, this is for your PlayStation Mini, so on and so forth.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of the legwork out. They've said, hey, we'll sell this to you. If it doesn't work, we'll send you a different one. Open a dispute with PayPal, whatever. Um, but it does get a lot of that legwork out of the way.
Yeah. And then
Now,
and then I want to say something about like there I don't um also what about the clone mini consoles where you go to buy a NES Classic and it's like, oh, it's an NES Classic with 500 games on it. you know and I can only imagine the emulation on that is terrible.
oh, like those cheap Chinese ones that they
Hmm.
sell in the mall.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've
Well,
seen those.
well,
Those
well, they have those. They have those where it's like you have 6,000 games, and it's actually like you'll have like three different like I don't know, you'll have like three different games, but each like difficulty is like a different game. So that's how they get
Yes.
away with it. So it's like, easy mode is a completely different game, which is kind of stupid. But but I was talking more specifically about the like where you have like you can get, I don't think they have the Genesis one, but I know they have the SNES Classic, and the NES Classic, where it's like you go on Amazon and you gotta be careful because it's like 500 games, and I don't know if it's like the entire library of NES games. I'm not sure. I haven't bought one, but I'd rather just I'd say for safety, know where you're getting your emulated games from, because I don't want to get like some knockoff from China and then it breaks.
Right. And be careful downloading ROMs on your computer
Yeah,
because, they may contain a virus.
yeah. So there's always that risk, when you're doing that.
Right. One really beautiful thing about retro gaming is, if you buy a Genesis, you buy a Nintendo, you buy a Super Nintendo, a Dreamcast, or whatever. People don't know, but like there are still brand new games being made for these older systems.
Hmm.
Or if you're somebody who's not into the older stuff, on Steam and good old games, there are games being made in the style of older games.
Hmm.
These indie titles. But I think the Dreamcast has gotten a new game every year since Sega discontinued it. It's the console that refuses to die.
Hmm.
I mean, even not just that one, but the Atari 2600 gets multiple games a year. Just go onto the Atari Age forums and the Atari Age website, and you'll see you can buy tons and tons of games, and they're really pushing the hardware boundaries of what that system is capable of. So if you're somebody who's going to buy an old system, don't think you're just relegated to old games. There is new stuff out there for you.
There's also like I know for a fact there's new stuff for the Sega Genesis also, and you get it in like an actual. Of course, it's not. I don't think they're licensed by Sega, but you actually get like a Genesis cartridge, or a case, so it looks like it goes right on your shelf with all your other games. You know,
Right?
you know.
Uh, First press games, or not first press games. What is their name? Uh, Limited Run Games.
Hmm.
They just did a reprint of Shantae. They had that available for pre-order. The actual Game Boy Color cartridge.
Oh, really? I have to look into that.
Yeah.
I, I was
And
actually
so,
I was actually thinking about
hopefully,
finding that game.
right. I hear it's fantastic. I've played some of the newer Shantae games. They're amazing. But I think it's a big thing that, like limited run games, they're kind of niche, but kind of not. They get all of these exclusivity deals with these game developers, and they publish the games, and they try to get as much content into like the newer games, include as much of the DLC into the games that they can. But they've also re-released Genesis games.
Hmm.
They've also re-released NES games. A company like First Press Games, they sell games like you can pre-order a brand new game for the Nintendo. You can pre-order a brand new game for the Game Boy Color. You know, um, this there's an application that you can create your own Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, and then if you can find the right people to work with, you can get that put on a cartridge, produce it in bulk, get it into packaging that looks like the original Game Boy Advance games. Includes a color manual and sell it, and that's what people are doing.
Hmm. Well, I also believe, in addition to that, I believe, I'm not sure if it's like if they're going through a different company and it's just being like produced by Sega, but I do believe here shortly Sega's actually re-releasing some of their older games. I think Zero Wing is coming out, and it's going to come out in a with a case and everything, and you can play it right on your Sega Genesis. They're actually releasing these older. I can't remember what all of them are, but I know they're releasing like four games, you know, and and that's something to think about too. Is like you were saying, there's it's even though the it's not a newer system, there are games. If you look for it, there are games coming out for these older systems. You know, whether it be through um, independent um, independent studios or the actual publishers themselves. Like Nintendo or Sega.
Right, right. And I could see that uh, taking off. The homebrew scene. We've also got teams that are behind doing hacks to older games. Giving Japanese only games translations. Um, and then
Well, that's
you know,
that's that's really how a lot of emulation got started. Was like people didn't have access to Final Fantasy V because it was Japan exclusive, and then the only way to bring it over here was an emulation. A fan translated emulation. You know.
right, right. And you've got companies who will take that updated patched ROM, put it on a cartridge, and you can have that as part of your collection. I've wanted to do the same thing with Sylvan Tale for the Game Gear.
Hmm.
That game to me just looks phenomenal. Um, but at the same time, um, for if you're somebody who's like a diehard, like, hey, I love this. I love the Genesis, and if you're somebody who's been collecting and playing Genesis games for a long time, you might start to get a little bored with what you currently have and some of these translations or even some of these hacks. There is one for Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition for the Genesis where someone has uh, changed like the sound driver so that way when they do their voices, it doesn't sound muffled like it's used
Yeah.
to. They corrected the colors to make it more
Hmm.
arcade accurate. They've done pretty much everything to
Yeah.
make it a lot more arcade accurate. And that's something I wish was in a physical cart itself so I could play that.
Well, there's something along the lines of that too, and something that I've been actually forgot about. I actually want to get that. There's I seen I think it was on eBay, where somebody had made a I guess you could call it a hack of Castlevania 2, where it was supposed to be more streamlined, less cryptic, a little more straightforward in what you got to do. You don't need Nintendo Power to figure out where you got to go, and
Yes.
just basically taking the bad parts of games and like re it's almost like re-editing a movie, you know. Um,
Mhm.
and that's something I actually wanted to try. And yes, I still like playing Castlevania 2, but I would that actually sounds very interesting to play a streamlined and better Castlevania 2. Um, and there's also another one I wanted to get was a homebrew actually of and it's a Castlevania game. Um, I don't think it actually has the Castlevania name because I don't think they can legally do that, but it's basically Castlevania, and yeah, I think you can get it on eBay, and it comes like in a black Nintendo cartridge, and it's supposed to be just like a full game, not a hack. It's its own thing, and I don't know if it has um new I don't know if it has like new sprites and stuff in it. Um, but that's something that also you might want to like, as you were saying, if you're getting bored, there are homebrews of games to like basically like almost like independent developers. I guess some guy in their basement, or on their computer desk making brand new games.
Right, right. I've heard of that too, where somebody uses some assets from a game but creates new ones to create a new kind of game from that.
Hmm.
I think that there's a famous example is Super Mario Welcome to Dinosaur Island.
Hmm.
Somebody took Super Mario Land on the Super Nintendo and really played up that Dinosaur Island theme, and created all new levels, all new storyline. One that happens a lot too is Pokemon.
Yes.
People love making hacks for Pokemon and creating their own stories behind it. Like, instead of just being some regular 12-year-old kid getting their first Pokemon, now you're a member of Team Rocket, and stuff like that. Or
Well,
what is it, Pokemon?
about that, I actually seen one on eBay. I seen a Pokemon hack the other day on eBay, and it was just too good not to share it with some friends. But it was called Pokemon My Ass,
Oh, yes, I've seen that. Well,
it's just panty shot is the first like that's what the cover is, and basically all the sprites are just naked naked people just fighting, you know, and of course it has like on the back it has like the girls like very lewd, you know, where almost naked, but yeah, like some poor kid like, hey mom, can I get a Pokemon My Ass? But
I'm pretty sure that's not happening, but
yeah,
who's to say?
but don't
Uh,
I hate to see what happens to Gardevoir in that one though.
oh God. Uh, I mean, that's like looking up Sonic the Hedgehog with Safe Search off, like, oh, my childhood. What are you guys doing to my childhood? I think a really famous example of that. Were you big into Pokemon at all when you were younger?
Not when I was younger. Which is kind of odd. I actually got into it more as an adult. Um, I played in the mid '90s. I did, because I was more like in the later '90s. I'd say when Pokemon kind of hit here in the U.S. Around '97, '98 is when like I guess the height of it. And I did mess around with Pokemon Blue, but it didn't go farther than that, and didn't really have anybody to share Pokemon with, so it was just like, eh. And cause even then, it was also like a stigma, to play. You can't be not 10 and play Pokemon,
Yes,
and
yes.
but I got back into Pokemon um, in Pokemon Pearl. Is when I got into it hardcore. And what was funny was somebody was selling their DS, and I said, and they were selling it for it was like 2008, I think it was 2007, 2008, and somebody was selling their DS Lite, and I was like, I'll buy it. They're selling for $50, and I was like, I'll take it. Um, but it was this pretty pink color. It was the pretty pink one. And yeah, I got made fun of because people were like, so what are you doing there? And I'm like, I'm playing Pokemon Pearl on my pretty pink my pretty pink DS. Don't judge me, all right? You know, like what are you doing? I'm feeding them puffins, all right? You know,
Yes.
here,
Well,
here you are in your 20s, like just like I got so many looks. I had somebody just go, oh, okay, well, never mind.
right, right. Well, the reason I brought it up was when I was in middle school, there was a grocery store that sold Game Boy Color games. I didn't know it at the time, but they were all like bootleg cartridges. It was like
Hmm.
96 games in one. But one thing that really stood out to me is they had Pokemon Jade version. This is way before people were making hacks of Pokemon, like my ass,
Yeah.
and putting that up on eBay on a cartridge. And really before the internet was such a huge thing. And I think even before the release of Pokemon Gold and Silver, but don't quote me on that necessarily.
Hmm.
Um, but it was some company, but they hired a team to pretty much make a hack of Katai Denju Telefang, and try to make it more Pokemon like. And those cartridges, they go for a lot of money now on eBay because there are people that bought, Pokemon Jade version when
Yeah.
Pokemania was a huge thing because we didn't know any better. I mean, I almost bought it.
Yeah.
I would have been a very disappointed kid or thinking, "Oh man, Pokemon's going in a weird direction now."
Yeah.
Um, and I have to wonder, like, did that really start some of that? Um, the nice thing now, though, is Telefang's actually a really good game, and there's a team working on translating it into English, and I hope that they can complete that because I would love to play that game.
Hmm. All right. Well, um, getting back on our topic of emulation. So I would say, um, so what would be your final verdict on anybody who out there is curious on emulation or retro gaming?
Yeah. I'm not one of the diehards who thinks that you need to play your Nintendo on a CRT television. Granted, if you do, you can play Duck Hunt properly, so
Yeah.
jealous of that. Um, but I also am not someone opposed to emulation. I have done emulation. I've bought handhelds that specifically do emulation. Um, what I've come to find though is that because I love the real hardware, I always end up going back to, yes, I could play hundreds of games on something like an RG 350, but there's just something about
Hmm.
the entire experience of, let's say for the Game Boy Advance, I have the system. When I'm out and about through these shops, finding a good deal on a game, if it's complete in box, or even if it's not
Hmm.
complete in box, if you can find nice shells for it, you can print the covers from what is it like the website where you can go and download artwork for the covers. I think it's thecoverproject.net. That's what I'm thinking of.
Hmm.
It's somebody scanned their their copy of the cardboard that the game came in. It allows you to print that out, put it onto a box. So you can actually have a shelf full of games if you can't find them complete in box. It still kind of gives you that experience.
Hmm.
And it's such an involved process of, being on the hunt, looking for a good deal, getting these games, playing them on the original hardware with all its limitations. Some people really love trying to take something like the Game Boy Advance or even like the original Game Boy, and they're like, hey, like let's put a new power supply in it. Let's give it a rechargeable battery. Let's give it a LCD display. Let's give it a much more powerful speaker. Like let's try to bring that ancient tech into the modern time and make it as awesome to play on as possible. I enjoy doing that. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people in the retro gaming community, they enjoy doing that too. RGB mods on their NES.
Yeah.
Even with that being said, I realize like it's an expensive endeavor.
Hmm.
There are people that think that we're crazy for doing something like that. I realize like, yeah, I could spend like 200 some dollars, have somebody spec out a Game Gear, and I can buy that, and they're like, with $200, you can go and buy a Switch Lite. I'm well aware of that.
Yeah.
There's a different experience when it comes to these older games and their simplicity and, kind of taking me back to a time that was easier, especially, during these crazy times during COVID.
Hmm.
But also realize that's not for everyone. And I'm not someone who's going to shun anyone for doing emulation. In fact, I encourage it. I
Hmm.
encourage people to try out an emulator for um, a system that they either had growing up or that they wanted to try out some games. You may find that, hey, you know what, I really enjoy this stuff. That may encourage you to go out and buy the hardware,
Hmm.
um, and buy those games. It did for me with some of the games on the Game Boy Advance, that I just couldn't find anywhere.
Hmm.
I put them on an emulator, played through the whole game. Summon Night Swordcraft Story. Played that game through an emulator on Game Boy Advance. It's my favorite game on that system.
Mm,
And if it wasn't for that emulator, I never would have found that. And so when I went on eBay, I bought that actual cartridge, started playing it on a Game Boy Advance SP. I was ecstatic.
yeah.
Um, I also realized though that the older systems they have their limitations. They're not high definition systems. Even with some of them, you can get as many crazy mods as you want. You could hook them up to something like a FrameMeister. You could run them through something like um, can't think of the name of it. It's like an HDMI dongle that upscales your
Yeah.
games.
Yeah.
Um,
Like the Retro Tink or the R2X or something like that, or the Rat 2X.
um, yes, I'm trying to. It's like a mix something. The M Classic. The
Okay.
M Classic. Yeah, I have one of those. I run my Dreamcast through it, so it upscales it to 1080p.
Hmm.
Something like that. The thing is, even with that, like I'm trying to do everything I can to get the best image quality out of my Dreamcast. If you've got a fairly decent PC, you can run a Dreamcast emulator, and those games are going to look way better on your computer than they ever will on my Dreamcast because I can only clean up those images and upscale them. When you've
Hmm.
got an emulator, it goes into the code and it's,
Yeah.
upscaling them. You can do things like add higher resolution textures, stuff like that. So I understand uh, emulation and its pros and cons, and that might be a great way to play certain games, but if you still want to own them, I
Yeah.
mean, I know people who they buy the games, but then they just play it on their emulator.
Yeah.
Uh, I think emulation's great, and one day when these discs stop working and the cartridges fail, that is going to be the way that some of us play these retro games. Maybe it'll be a bunch of ROMs loaded onto an EverDrive,
Hmm.
and you'll play it on something like a system made by Analog Interactive.
Yeah.
That's probably I feel like that's going to be a thing. And I kind of hope that if the Atari 2600, it's retro. I mean, if anything, that's antique gaming to me. That's more than retro gaming.
Hmm.
Um, those games don't cost anything. Nobody is after them because all the people who were nostalgic for those games, they got their Ataris, they got their games for it. There's always going to be a collector base for
Yeah.
some of these games. My hope is that in the future, people will get nostalgic for things like the PlayStation 3 and the 360 and the Wii U and the Wii, and we'll start to see some of these game prices go down for these older consoles.
Oh yeah. And I'm gonna go ahead and coin the term right now. I'm gonna call it retro gaming entropy. but anyways, I would say that that seems to be the verdict between us is that any way you can get to it, it whatever it takes. If you're that guy who got to have it authentic and you can do it, I'm all for you, Dougie. But if but hey, if it's easier for you to get on a Raspberry Pi or your PC, you got to do what you got to do. I just want you to play what games you want to play. So, with that being said, Ducky, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And it's been a pleasure and very enlightening. A lot of things I've learned, and nice to see somebody who's not completely crazy. You know, like
No, I mean, I'm only 29, so
yeah,
I kind of came into the retro gaming scene as a younger person
hmm,
than who was already in it. So I'm not dyed in the wool like some of these guys are.
yeah,
Uh,
well,
but it's a lot of fun.
yeah. Well, anyways, Ducky, I wanna thank you for coming on the show and go ahead and give a shout out to your blog.
Yeah, so my blog is librafree.me. Also, for those of you who are interested in retro gaming, We will have an interview coming up with the Retro Kai store, um, kind of how they got started, and also some discussion on the new Magic screen that they've got in the works coming out soon for the Game Gear. So, yeah, on the lookout for that.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely get that when it comes out, and I think, and I'm gonna have to install that one for you. So,
Yes.
so, all right, Ducky. Thank you for coming on the show, and for everybody out there in the Boneyard, stay safe and be good to each other.